Welcome to this deep dive. I think it's safe to say you're here because you really want to get a grip on what's happening in HIV research, especially with all this talk about AGT103T.
Right.
You're in the right place. Consider this like your crash course on this potential breakthrough.
Yeah, AGT103T, it's a gene therapy, and it's getting closer to becoming a reality, like actually out there helping
Yeah.
people. And that's huge because it could totally change how we think about managing HIV, like even down to how testing works in the future.
Absolutely. We're not talking about a little change here. This could be a total game changer. So today, we're diving deep into the recent phase 2 news, but we're also going to connect it to something that's probably already on your radar, HIV lab testing.
Exactly.
Because understanding the science behind this, well, it's not just for scientists. It's about seeing how the way we define living with HIV, like the whole concept, could be on the brink of a huge shift.
A huge shift, yeah. And one that could potentially affect you, your loved ones, like the whole landscape of HIV care.
Huh.
So let's get into it. We'll break down the science behind AGT103 on AT, look at where it's at in the clinical trials, and really figure out what this could all mean moving forward.
Perfect. So gene therapy. AGT103T is a gene therapy, and even though it sounds super high-tech, the basic idea is actually pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Basically, we're talking about tweaking a person's cells so they can fight off disease from the inside. And with AGT103T, the goal is to get your own immune cells ready to go head-to-head with HIV.
Right, and that's a big difference from how we approach things now with ART.
Antiretroviral therapy, right?
Exactly. ART is all about keeping the virus suppressed, like keeping it under control so people with HIV can live healthy lives. But it doesn't wipe out the virus completely. AGT103T, it goes for a more direct solution.
Yeah.
And, potentially something that could last a lot longer. Think of it like this. RT is great at keeping the water out of a boat that has leaks, but AGT103T is trying to, actually fix those holes for good.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So here's where things get really interesting. One of the biggest challenges with HIV treatment has always been this thing called the viral reservoir.
Yeah.
And that's like, I don't know, imagine these little hiding spots where HIV can basically lay low. And if someone stops RT, the virus can come back with a vengeance. That's why we haven't been able to totally get rid of HIV.
Right. These reservoirs are like, they're kind of like sleeper cells, just waiting for the right moment to reactivate.
Exactly.
And the thing about AGT103T is that it's designed to go after that reservoir specifically. Yeah, it modifies a person's T cells, those crucial immune cells, so they can actually track down and wipe out these HIV-infected cells, even when they're dormant.
Like seek and destroy.
Yeah, exactly. It's like giving your immune system a super-powered upgrade, a target and eliminate mission.
Okay, T cells. We hear about those a lot with HIV.
Mm-hmm.
What makes them so important in fighting this off?
So think of your immune system as like an army.
Right.
T cells are the frontline soldiers. They're the ones that find and take out threats, including viruses like HIV. And you have different types of T cells with different jobs. You've got CD4 T cells, the helper cells. They're like the generals, coordinating the whole immune response. HIV, though, it mainly attacks those CD4 cells, which is why the immune system gets weaker over time if the virus isn't under control.
Right, and that's why it's so important for people with HIV to keep an eye on their CD4 count, right?
Exactly. It tells you a lot about how well your immune system is holding up.
Okay, so then where do CD8 T cells fit into this army we're talking about?
So the CD8 T cells, they're also called cytotoxic or killer T cells. They're the infantry, the ones actually going in for the kill.
Gotcha.
What AGT103T does is it basically gives these CD8 T cells a serious upgrade, like special targeting systems that let them zero in on HIV-infected cells,
Yeah.
even the ones hiding out in those reservoirs.
Yeah.
By changing the patient's own T cells, the goal is to set up this really strong, long-lasting defense against HIV.
So cool. Okay, now that we got a good handle on the science, let's talk about where this therapy is at right now. We've seen some news about phase 1A results. What were the main takeaways from that first trial?
So phase 1A, it's really all about safety. The main thing is to see if AGT103T is safe and if people tolerate it well. And the good news is, it looks like it is safe, which is a big deal, a big step for any new treatment.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
But beyond safety, were there any signs that it might actually work?
So phase 1A isn't really designed to prove that a treatment is effective, but researchers are always looking for clues. They track all sorts of markers. And some of the data suggested that AGT103T could be having an effect on the amount of virus in the body, the viral load.
Interesting.
But remember, this is a small, early study. It's just a first peek.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Now, viral load, that's something a lot of people with HIV are really familiar with. Could you explain why it's so important to keep track of that and how they were looking at it in the phase 1A trial with AGT103T?
Sure. So viral load basically tells you how much HIV is in a person's blood. A high viral load means the virus is actively replicating, which isn't good because that can damage the immune system. With RT, the goal is to get that viral load down as low as possible, ideally to undetectable levels. Now, in the phase 1A trial, even though safety was the main focus, researchers would have been watching to see if AGT103T had any early effect on reducing that viral load. Even a small reduction at that stage is a good sign. It means the therapy might be doing something.
Got it. So now let's talk about phase 2. This feels like a really big deal. What are the main things researchers are trying to find out in this next phase?
You're right, phase 2 is a crucial step. Here, it's about getting a clearer picture of how well AGT103T actually works in a larger group of people and continuing to monitor its safety. Phase 2 trials usually involve more participants than phase 1A. It's all about getting statistically significant results, like, okay, what we saw in the first phase, is it really happening? Researchers will be focusing on what we call primary endpoints.
Primary endpoints.
Yeah, those are the main outcomes they're looking at, the key indicators to see if the treatment is working.
Okay.
Think of them as the targets they're aiming for.
Got it.
To see if they hit the mark.
So what kind of timeline are we looking at? When can we expect to know for sure if AGT103T is a breakthrough?
Clinical trials take time. They're complex. But based on what we know now, we might see those phase 2 results in a couple of years. And if this phase shows that AGT103T is effective and still safe, well, that's a huge step forward. It means we can move on to larger phase 3 trials. And those are necessary before the FDA or other regulatory bodies can approve a treatment. That approval, it comes in the form of a BLA, a biologics license application. Basically, the company's asking for permission to make the treatment available to everyone.
It's all very exciting stuff, but like we've been saying, we have to temper that excitement.
Right. We have to be realistic about the scientific process. It's rigorous.
Exactly. Things are looking good. There's a lot of hope, but we have to remember that not every potential treatment makes it through all the phases. And that's why phase 2 and everything that comes after it is so important.
Absolutely. It's about being sure that AGT103T is safe and effective.
Okay. Let's shift gears a bit and talk about something that's really important right now. Lab testing. Even with the potential of AGT103T on the horizon, knowing about current HIV testing is still crucial. Can you give us a rundown of the standard tests out there?
Sure. So most HIV tests today look for evidence of the virus in your blood, usually with an antibody test. It detects those antibodies your body makes when you're infected with HIV. There are also those combination tests, sometimes called fourth-generation tests, that look for both antibodies and antigens.
Antigens?
Yeah, specifically a protein from the virus called P24.
Okay.
These combination tests can sometimes detect HIV earlier than the antibody-only tests. And then, of course, you have viral load tests. We talked about those earlier. They measure the amount of HIV in your blood and are super important for monitoring the infection and how well treatment is working.
Right, right. And there's also the window period to think about, isn't there? Can you explain what that is and why early testing is so crucial?
Yeah, the window period is that time between when you're exposed to HIV and when a test can actually detect it. The virus might be there doing its thing, but your body hasn't had enough time to make enough antibodies or antigens for the test to pick up.
Gotcha.
And that window period, it can vary depending on the type of test. But getting diagnosed early is super important. It means people can start treatments sooner, which is way better for their long-term health. It also helps prevent them from passing the virus on to others. Early treatment really does make a difference.
So let's say AGT103T really takes off and it works the way we hope it does. How could that change HIV testing in the future? Would we need new kinds of tests?
That's a good question. If AGT103T leads to a functional cure, where people can control the virus long-term without taking medication every day, it could definitely change how we think about testing.
Okay.
We might see tests that are specifically designed to detect those modified T cells, the ones AGT103T creates, and maybe even more advanced tests to see how long that functional cure lasts.
Wow.
But those standard tests we use now, the ones that diagnose new HIV infections, those will probably always be important.
Makes sense.
Public health relies on them.
You mentioned earlier that even with the functional cure, we'd still need to keep track of the viral load. Can you talk more about that?
Even if AGT103T is really successful at suppressing the virus, monitoring is still going to be key.
Okay.
We need to make sure the virus stays under control, that it doesn't come back.
Right.
And viral load tests, they're the most direct way to do that. They can tell us right away if the virus is becoming active again.
Like an early warning system.
Exactly. It gives us a chance to step in if we need to.
What about CD4 counts? We know they're important for tracking the immune system. How would we monitor CD4 counts in people who've had AGT103T?
I think CD4 counts would still be a big part of monitoring. AGT103T is all about controlling the virus, but we also have to make sure the immune system stays healthy and strong. And CD4 counts tell us a lot about that.
Right. Okay, we need to talk about something else, something important. There's still a lot of misinformation out there about HIV.
Yeah, there's.
And some people might be a little wary of gene therapy. And while we're not going to get into specific myths, we do want to acknowledge that there are misunderstandings about HIV and how it's treated.
Absolutely. It's really important to get information from trusted sources and to be able to have open and honest conversations about HIV.
Absolutely.
As new treatments like AGT103T come along, it's even more important to get rid of those myths and make sure people have the facts they need to make good decisions about their health. You might hear things like, oh, gene therapy is dangerous, or this new treatment means HIV isn't a big deal anymore. It's important to remember that these are complex treatments and they're still being studied.
Another big thing to think about is access.
Yes.
If AG203T works, how do we make sure everyone who needs it can get it? It doesn't matter where they live or how much money they have. That seems like a huge challenge.
It is. That's a really important point. It's not just about the science. It's about making sure everyone has equal access to groundbreaking treatments like this. It's a massive undertaking, and it takes collaboration. Researchers, companies, government agencies, patient groups, we all have to work together.
Yeah.
We have to think about manufacturing, distribution, making sure the price is fair. We don't want this to be a treatment only available to a select few.
Absolutely. Lastly, let's not forget about the human side of all this. Living with HIV can take a real emotional and psychological toll.
It can.
The hope that comes with these new treatments with AGT103T, that can be incredibly meaningful.
Absolutely. It goes beyond the data, beyond the trials.
Yeah.
This is about giving people hope, taking away the burden of daily medication, easing those worries about the future. It's about a better quality of life. The idea of living without constantly needing medication, that can have a huge psychological impact. It's a big deal.
Okay, as we wrap up this deep dive, let's go over the key takeaways one more time. AGT103T is a really exciting, innovative approach to treating HIV. It goes after that persistent viral reservoir, which is a game changer. The phase 1A results were encouraging, it seems safe. And now, this phase 2 trial, it's the next crucial step to see how well it works.
Yeah.
Current HIV testing methods are still super important, but if AGT103T is successful, we might see new testing strategies in the future. And of course, we can't forget about making sure everyone can access this treatment and that it's affordable, and we have to consider the emotional well-being of people affected by HIV.
Exactly. This is such a fast-moving field, and AGT103T is giving us a glimpse of what HIV care could be like in the future. A future where long-term viral control without needing to take pills every day could be a reality for a lot of people.
It's really amazing. If you have any questions about AGT103T or HIV lab testing, please reach out. We always want to hear from you.
Okay.
And stay informed, stay hopeful. There's so much progress happening in HIV research.
It's true. These are really remarkable times for HIV research. Keep that hope alive. And remember, understanding the science, it empowers all of us.
And one last reminder, this is a developing story. Things are changing all the time, so make sure you're getting the latest news from reliable sources. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.